My daughter was clinging to life on a ventilator when her husband posted a video of himself dancing in a robe at his Spanish villa. And not even 20 minutes later, I made a decision. He wasn't walking away from this untouched. My name's Frank Holloway. I'm 56. Widowed. Spent most of my adult life designing security infrastructure for government contractors. Quiet, precise work. My daughter Lacey was the one bright thing in all that silence. My compass. I watched her through the ICU glass as her lungs failed, her body limp under a maze of tubes and wires. The doctors said pneumonia, but it wasn't just that. It was exhaustion. Emotional. Physical. From trying to hold together a marriage that had turned into quicksand. Her husband, Ethan, was supposed to be at a tech summit in Madrid. That's what Lacey told me when she crashed on my couch last week, coughing so hard she couldn't sleep. But Ethan wasn't in Madrid. He was in Ibiza, shirtless, buzzed, pouring champagne on a woman in a snakeskin bikini while No Bad Days blared in the background. The caption under the clip? Some people will suffocate you if you let them. Choose freedom. He used to bring her soup when she had migraines. Now he was mocking her like she was the problem. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't punch the wall. I just made a mental note. When this ends, he won't like what comes next. The first time I met Ethan, he wore a dress shirt with no tie and pitched me a startup idea before I'd even finished my drink. Lacey was in love, so I kept my mouth shut. I figured, all right, ambitious, a little slick, but maybe he grows into it. He didn't. He bounced from gig to gig, burned through 3 consulting ventures, and left my daughter carrying the financial load. She covered the mortgage, the car, his dental, never complained, said it was temporary. But the thing about Ethan? He didn't fail. He reinvented. When Lacey got sick, she texted me at 4 a.m. Dad, I think I need to go to the hospital. By the time I got her to the ER, her oxygen levels were in the 70s. The nurse said if we'd waited another hour, she might not have made it. I called Ethan 6 times that day, left a voicemail, sent a text with the words, ICU, intubated, critical. He didn't respond. But later that night, he posted a story from his villa pool with some tan influencer draped across his chest. The caption? Sometimes you don't realize how heavy the anchor is until you cut the rope. I sat there in the hospital cafeteria holding my phone like it was a loaded weapon. Silence isn't the same as forgiveness. Not anymore. Day 6 in the hospital, Lacey's oxygen needs increased. They had to flip her face down to keep her lungs from collapsing. I sat outside, sipping burnt coffee while a ventilator kept her alive. Ethan? He was tagged in an Instagram reel from some rooftop DJ set, smiling with his arms around 2 different women. One of them, Travel Witch, tagged Lacey in a comment under a meme. When his ex is in the ICU, but he's in his ICU era. That was the moment I stopped hoping he'd show up. You want to know the truth? I wasn't just heartbroken. I was taking notes. Every caption, every tag, every image he posted while my daughter clung to life. That wasn't just proof of who he'd become. That was material. They used to say I over-engineered everything. Ask Ethan if that's still true. I spoke to the nurses, brought coffee every morning, asked questions, took notes. People think grief makes you forgetful. For me, it sharpened everything. Day 11. Lacey opened her eyes for the first time. Couldn't speak, but she squeezed my hand. A weak, deliberate grip. Her lips moved. I leaned closer. Where's Ethan? I lied. Spain. Work trip. He doesn't know how bad it is. She looked away. That was the last time she asked about him. I kept scrolling his feed. I watched a live stream where he toasted to freedom with a cigar and called marriage a cage built by codependents. His followers flooded the comments with praise. One woman wrote, "Cut that cord, King." That's what they were calling it now. Freedom, not abandonment, not cowardice, not betrayal. I didn't reply. I didn't post some bitter rant. I just saved the video, labeled it, indexed it, the same way I used to catalog breach points on defense contracts. Because here's what people like Ethan forget. The storm doesn't pass when you walk away. Sometimes, the storm is watching, and it has your name written all over it. When I left Pittsburgh, I didn't say goodbye. Not to friends, not to family, not even to Lacey. She'd been discharged to a step-down rehab facility, walking slowly with a cane and trying to relearn how to breathe on her own. She didn't ask where I was going. I think she knew I needed silence. And I didn't go far, just far enough. Up in Potter County, tucked between pine forest and a broken logging road, sat the cabin my brother and I inherited when our father passed. No internet unless you drove 10 miles. No neighbors unless you counted deer. I spent the first week chopping wood and replacing the busted window above the kitchen sink. Not because it needed fixing, but because I needed something to hit that wouldn't bleed. Ethan was still posting. His face was everywhere, champagne glass in hand, smile wide, arms spread like he was the second coming of Christ in linen. Only now he wasn't just posing. He was teaching. Men, he said in one video, shirtless on a balcony, you gotta detox the leeches. People who drain your energy. People who claim love but smother your spark. Don't wait. Cut the cord. The caption read, you can't find clarity while someone else is coding your thoughts. The comments were filled with sycophants, mostly guys who looked like they'd failed their way into guruhood. Preach, brother. This hit too hard. Needed this today. But one comment caught my eye. My guy? Still owe me for the Bali contract. Sent the invoice again. It was gone within hours. The account deleted. That was the first drop of blood in the water. I didn't respond. I didn't react. I just logged it. I'd already brought in Linda Caraway, a compliance analyst I'd worked with back when I managed physical security for a defense supplier. She owed me a favor from an old DC job. I sent her one sentence. I need every financial relationship this man has touched in the last 3 years. 2 days later, she wrote back, you building a case or a bonfire? I told her I hadn't decided yet. From the outside, it looked like I'd disappeared. No social media, no email replies. My number routed to a voicemail that played a fake, international roaming message. But I was more present than I'd ever been. I watched everything. Logged timestamps, captions, live reactions, even auto-transcribed podcast episodes where Ethan rewrote his marriage as a cautionary tale. And then one night, the rhythm broke. I was sitting in the cabin, reading through a new Dropbox Linda had sent. Documents showing 2 LLCs that had quietly folded under Ethan's name, when I noticed something in one of the folders. It wasn't one of Linda's files. It was a shared Google Drive notification. A document Ethan had uploaded under an old shared Gmail account he forgot he'd linked. It was titled, Expansion Slide Deck, Detox Collective, Confidential. I clicked. What I saw made me lean back in the chair. A 14-slide pitch to potential investors. Timelines, projections, branding mock-ups, even fake testimonials. There was a bullet point that read, founder went through traumatic divorce from high drama, chronically ill ex-wife. Now building empire from peace. Below it, a photo of Lacey and Ethan, cropped to exclude her oxygen tube, captioned, the past. I stared at that photo for a full minute. Then I copied it, timestamped it, and saved it under a new folder on my desktop. Phase 2, Collateral. The next morning, I drove into town and visited a cafe with solid Wi-Fi. I needed to see someone in person. 3 years ago, Ethan had tried launching a crypto wellness app, some nonsense about emotional blockchain and soul coins. It crashed before beta, but not before he took in over $85,000 from 3 private backers. One of those backers, it turns out, was based 2 towns over, a man named Vincent Bray, former tech investor turned real estate broker. I walked into his office unannounced. His receptionist gave me the usual, do you have an appointment spiel until I dropped Ethan's name. Then she went quiet and buzzed me through. Vincent stood when I entered. Mid-50s, short beard, expensive jacket. He looked tired, suspicious. I don't usually take unscheduled meetings, he said. I know, I said. I wouldn't be here unless you'd lost something. That got his attention. I sat down, opened my folder, and slid a printed screenshot across the desk. Ethan's latest Instagram caption, success doesn't ask permission. Neither do I. Then I slid over a copy of the investor term sheet from the failed crypto app. Vincent's name was on the bottom, scrawled in blue ink. He owe you money? Vincent exhaled through his nose. Sat back. 6 figures. Plus interest. He ghosts every time I send papers. I nodded. Would you like him to stop breathing long enough to read them? Vincent squinted at me. What are you planning? I'm not planning anything illegal, I said. I'm just collecting unpaid debts. One piece at a time. There was a pause. Then Vincent asked, "You his lawyer?" I shook my head. "I'm his ex-father-in-law." Vincent stared at me for a long time. Then he nodded once. He didn't ask another question. He just stood, opened a drawer, and handed me a flash drive. "Everything I have on him," he said. "Use it however you want." I left without another word. Back at the cabin that night, I reviewed the files. One in particular stood out, an email thread between Ethan and a woman named Corinne, who'd fronted the Bali retreat's booking deposit. Ethan promised a full refund within 90 days if the launch didn't pan out. It had been 14 months. I messaged her from a burner account with one line. "Still waiting on your Bali refund?" She replied 7 minutes later. "Who are you?" I didn't answer, but I knew she'd asked the question in a few other places now. 2 days later, Linda sent a warning. "Frank, side note. Someone's poking around my LinkedIn profile. A guest account with no name hit my audit page twice. Could be coincidence, but just letting you know." I stared at her message for a while. That was the moment I realized I wasn't the only one watching anymore. Ethan's world had started to shift. Sloane, his girlfriend, his co-star, had stopped tagging him. Her last 3 posts were solo shots with vague captions like, "People change. Lessons don't." One of her stories was from a beach. She was crying, no filter, saying she needed space from the toxicity. Her voice cracked halfway through. She didn't mention him by name, but she didn't have to. I watched that video and felt nothing. She wasn't the reason. She was just another mask Ethan wore. The same way he wore ambition. The same way he wore regret. Wore sincerity. Wore marriage. All for the camera. Lacey texted me that night. First message in over a week. Saw his podcast got pulled. Said it violated some TOS thing. "Is that you?" I typed, then deleted, then typed again. "Not me, but it's happening." She replied with a single question. "Are you okay?" I looked around the cabin, at the folders on the table, the wall map with red pins, the empty fireplace where the stack of Phase 1 notebooks used to be. "Yeah," I wrote back. "Just busy." The next morning, I walked down the gravel drive to the shed behind the cabin. It hadn't been opened in years. Inside, I found the weatherproof case where I used to keep backup drives from my security work. Under that, the black binder I'd brought from home the day I left the hospital. On the front, I'd written 2 words in red ink. Phase 2. I set it on the table, opened the cover, and flipped to the spreadsheet inside. A long column of dates, deadlines, leverage points. At the bottom, next to the final cell, was a countdown. 7 days remaining. The silence broke before sunrise, and it wasn't mine. I'd just poured my first cup of coffee when my burner phone buzzed. Not with a message from Linda. Not with an alert from one of my flagged feeds. It was from Sloane. Or at least, the name said Sloane. The number was blocked. The message was simple. "Is this Frank? We need to talk." I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. Instead, I waited. I watched. And 10 minutes later, a video went live. It didn't last long, 36 minutes before she pulled it, but it was enough. She didn't name names. Not exactly. But she wasn't subtle either. Sitting in what looked like a dim hotel hallway, Sloane spoke in a low, tired voice, sounding more like someone giving a deposition than an influencer live stream. "There are things I've seen that don't sit right," she said. "I used to think we were building something, but now I think I was just cover. For him. For what he was hiding." She talked about paperwork that never got filed, wire transfers that disappeared midstream, coaching packages that were promised then ghosted. She said she was speaking up because she didn't want to be complicit anymore. Then, just before the video ended, she paused and added, "There's someone out there watching all of this. I don't know who, but I think I know why." That line, that last sentence, it made my pulse spike, not from fear, but from a thrill I hadn't felt in decades. She didn't say my name, but I could hear the tremble in her voice. She wasn't just scared of Ethan anymore. She was scared of the dark. The kind of dark that doesn't announce itself. The kind that just moves. I didn't post anything. Didn't reply. But I did send her something. No words. Just a file. A screenshot of the brand contract Ethan had edited without her name. And a 6-second clip of his off-camera footage, mid-laugh, saying, "Sloane? She's a placeholder. I candy. She knows that." I sent it from a burner account. No sender. No caption. Then I closed the laptop and stepped outside into the cold morning air, watching steam rise off the mug in my hands like smoke off a fuse. Later that day, Toby called. His voice sounded cagey, distrustful. I could hear background traffic, like he wasn't calling from home. Hey, man, you said your name was Frank. That's right. Mind if I ask where you got my number? I don't mind, I said, calm as ever. You were in Ethan's launch materials. I traced the metadata. It wasn't difficult. There was a pause, then a quiet sigh. I thought maybe you were one of his guys trying to scare me. I let that hang a beat too long before I said, Toby, if I was one of his guys, we wouldn't be having this conversation. He chuckled, more nervous than amused. So what do you want? You kept the original files, I said. I know you did. I don't want all of them. Just one clip. The one where he jokes about the retreat junkies being broke and gullible. Another long pause. You know he threatened me over that footage, right? What did he say? Told me if I ever leaked anything that wasn't on brand, he'd bury me. Said I signed an NDA. Thing is, I never signed anything. That was all I needed. You don't owe him silence, Toby. But if you're not sure, ask yourself something. You think he's going to be in a position to bury anybody 6 months from now? Toby hesitated, then said, How do I know you're not just trying to sink him for personal reasons? Because I'm not just watching Ethan, I said, my voice lower now. I'm watching everything. Everyone he stepped on to climb. And I'm making sure none of them stay buried. The next morning, a file appeared in my burner inbox. 6 clean seconds of him laughing with a flute of champagne in hand, saying, None of these people will see a dime. They're not clients. They're content. I saved it, tagged it, labeled it for later. But before I could close the file, my cursor hovered over the frame. Something in me stuttered. Maybe it was the laugh, so casual, so certain. Maybe it was how familiar it sounded. The same laugh he used to give Lacey at Christmas when she made dumb puns over dinner. The same laugh he used to have when he poured wine for both of them on my back deck. And all at once, I felt the fury rise in my chest like smoke from a long-smothered fire. I slammed the laptop shut, stood, and walked to the back room where the Phase 2 binder sat on the table, buried under a stack of printed screenshots and depositions. Beneath it was a smaller folder, an old one. Inside, a photo I hadn't looked at since the day Lacey came out of her coma. Her at age 10, missing front tooth, standing next to me in a matching Steelers hoodie, holding a flashlight like a sword. The smile in that photo hit me harder than anything Ethan had ever said. I ran a finger along the edge of the frame. And for the first time in months, I said it out loud, quietly, like it burned my throat. He almost killed her. Then I tore a page in half from the binder and walked away. I needed the fire again. Cold calculations don't work unless there's heat behind them. The next 48 hours unfolded like a final stress test. First came Linda's text. His agency pulled out of his speaking contract. Found the unfiled tax paperwork from 22. You're welcome. Then came the comment flood on Ethan's last remaining video. Didn't this guy defraud Bali attendees? Y'all still following him? Lacey's dad coming for blood. Check the audio. You'll hear everything. And in the middle of that chaos, Sloan posted a muted reel, an old clip of her and Ethan on set for a launch shoot, both of them smiling. But no music, no audio, just one caption. When silence was safer. I clicked the comments. One user wrote, Is that Frank's voice off camera? Another, Wait, is that the Frank? That's when I knew the mask was starting to slip. Not for me, for him. And now he was looking over his shoulder, asking questions that didn't have answers. That night, I opened my inbox and found a forwarded email from Linda. Subject line, Urgent, Royce Reputation Defense, Proposed Response Strategy. It was from his PR firm. Bullet points, talking points, crisis language. But one sentence near the bottom made me pause. Until we identify the source of the leaks, we cannot contain further exposure. It appears to be internal, personal, and calculated. Exactly. I walked out to the shed behind the cabin, opened the sealed envelope I'd prepped, and added something new to it. A USB drive. Not labeled. Not explained. Inside it was a single folder named, Look What You Built. And inside that, the video from Toby, the photo from the investor retreat, the Bali refund email thread, and the recording Ethan forgot he was on when he said, If it all crashes, I'll just blame the sick one. They always believe the survivor. I folded the letter again. But before sealing it, I added one line to the bottom in pen. You were never the survivor, Ethan. Just the virus. I placed the envelope inside a plain manila package and sealed it with tape. And then, quietly, deliberately, I placed it in the outgoing mail bin at the drop point Linda and I arranged weeks ago. There was no tracking number, no signature, no sender, but there would be no doubt where it came from once it landed. Because revenge doesn't need a name. It only needs a return address. The first video hit Twitter at 6:23 a.m. It was a shaky phone recording of Ethan getting ambushed in a parking garage downtown. Two guys with handheld mics, one woman from a podcast I recognized, all shouting over each other. The clip barely lasted 30 seconds before Ethan shoved past them, holding a manila envelope to his chest like it was radioactive. You could hear him snap, "No comment. Delete this. I'll sue all of you," as he ducked behind the wheel of a matte black SUV. But the angle was wide enough to see the license plate, the sweat on his temple, and the lawyer fumbling behind him like he hadn't signed up for this circus. That was the first time viewers saw the envelope. Mine. A few hours later, the second video dropped, this one clearer, recorded from inside the courthouse elevator. Ethan and his attorney stood inside with two silent marshals. The attorney looked straight ahead, stone-faced. Ethan looked wrecked, red around the eyes, jaw locked, twitch in the corner of his mouth like he was chewing on regret and didn't like the taste. And in his left hand, still clutching the envelope. That image, Ethan Royce, former self-proclaimed freedom architect, being escorted to a closed-door deposition while holding the evidence of his own collapse, made it to the front page of Reddit within an hour. The top comment? Guess he finally found something too heavy to manifest away. I didn't repost it. Didn't like it. But I saved the image to my drive. Not for evidence. Just for me. Linda didn't need to call. She did anyway. You watching? She asked, dry, almost amused. I said, just saw the parking garage ambush. That came fast. She gave a little hum. That's the thing about silence. When it finally cracks, the sound travels far. There was a pause before she added, and it wasn't me who sent the archive. You know that, right? I leaned back in my chair, the light from the window catching the edge of the envelope template I'd left out on my desk. I know. Another pause. I assume you used the journalist who covered that Arizona wellness scandal last year. Yeah, I said. She knew the language. Knew how to separate drama from data. Linda didn't ask anything else. She just said, then I think that's the end of it. I said no. Still something left? There's always something left, I said. And I ended the call. Because this story wasn't about Ethan anymore. It was about what he tried to bury. 3 days later, I visited Lacey. The nurse buzzed me in with a warm nod. She knew me by now. Same time every week, same seat by the window. Lacey was there, tea in hand, a thick scarf wrapped around her neck like a reminder of how close she'd come to silence. She looked better, brighter. Her face had gained back color. Her posture straighter now, her laugh less guarded. But her eyes, they still carried the weight. We sat in silence for a while, watching the wind move through the trees. Then she said, he called me. I didn't move. She added, left a voicemail. Said he was sorry, that things got out of hand, that he hoped I'd be safe, and that maybe someday I'd understand. I looked at her. Her jaw was set tight. Her fingers clutched around the ceramic like it grounded her. Did you call him back? I asked. She shook her head. I didn't have to. Someone else already answered for me. Her voice wavered, just slightly. I saw the article. The podcast takedown. The retreat cancellation. Even Sloane's weird little breakthrough post, where she finally admitted she was complicit. She turned and looked at me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in months. Not just pain, but clarity. I was afraid, she said. For so long. Afraid no one would believe me. That I was the crazy one. That he was the victim of my stress, my sickness, my clinginess. Her hands were shaking now. I thought maybe I was too much. That maybe I was the anchor. You never were, I said. He just didn't want to swim. She nodded slowly, her lips pressing tight. Then she asked, was it you? Her voice didn't carry anger. Just quiet hope. I didn't lie. Not this time. It was me. She exhaled, closed her eyes, then whispered something I wasn't prepared for. He left me to die? She looked straight at me now, voice trembling. And you didn't. I felt that line like a punch to the ribs. She wasn't thanking me. She was stating a fact. She stood, wrapped the scarf tighter, and gave me a look I'll never forget. Not warm, not cold, just real. I don't need to know how, she said. Just, thank you for seeing me. When she walked back inside, I stayed seated. It took a long time before I could move. Back at the cabin that night, I opened the archive. Not the digital one, the real one. The 3-ring binder that held everything from the beginning. Printouts of live stream transcripts, forensic banking flags, a timeline of failed company formations, screenshots of every fake follower purchase, every deleted apology tweet, every clipped-out audio slip. I added one final page to the back. A photo. Ethan standing in the middle of the courthouse parking lot, surrounded by microphones, his hand gripping the envelope so hard the edges bent. The caption I wrote under it, not for public eyes, just for the record. Freedom, when filtered through cowardice, always ends in exposure. I pulled out the thumb drive from the back panel of the binder, formatted it, snapped it in half, tossed it in the fire. Then, one by one, I fed every piece of paper into the flames. Not to erase the evidence, but because I didn't need it anymore. The world had seen the truth, and he'd felt it. Not through bruises or headlines or screaming matches, but through the thing men like Ethan fear the most, credibility. No more platform, no more podcast, no more funded retreats, legacy ventures, or late-night savior stories told over $400 wine. His name was burned into a different category now, one that no rebrand could clean. As the final pages turned to ash, I stood by the fire pit and watched them curl and blacken until nothing recognizable remained. And then, as the flames dimmed, I said one last thing, just to myself, just loud enough to matter. I never raised my voice, because I didn't have to.